When we were younger, many of us were taught a simple truth. Spend only what you earn. Live within your means. Save for tomorrow. And avoid borrowing unless it's absolutely necessary. Because borrowing is like walking on the edge of a cliff. You might keep your balance for a while, but the ground is narrow, and one wrong step can send you tumbling into the rocks below. That wisdom guided households and communities for decades, for generations. Yet somehow, at the level of nations, we abandon this. The global financial system today is built on debt. The US dollar, the euro, these are not currencies backed by savings or productivity alone. They are currencies kept alive by the constant expansion of borrowing. Without debt, the economies will falter and will fail. Let's take the euro as a prime example. When it was launched back in 1999, it was meant to unify Europe under one single stable currency. Disciplined, resistant to inflation, a safeguard against reckless government spending. But it was designed with a flaw. Europe created monetary union without the fiscal side of things. Countries like Germany, with its culture of strict discipline, were tied together with countries like Greece and Italy, who carried heavy debt burdens. In good times, this was manageable. In crisis, the contradictions tore at the fabric of the euro. The 2008 financial crash, the Greek debt crisis, the more recent pandemic shocks, all exposed the euro as a less unifying currency and more of a fragile compromise. Then there is the US dollar. The nearly 8 decades it has ruled as the world's reserve currency. Nations traded in dollars. Central banks store them in dollars. Commodities from oil to wheat are priced in dollars. But behind the dominance lies a single truth. America's economy is addicted to debt. Its national debt now exceeds its annual economic output. The dollar's power depends not on physical prudence, but on mere global trust. The world accepts dollars because it has always accepted dollars. But history tells us differently. When trust erodes, reserve currencies fall. That was the story of the British pound, once thought unshakable until its empire collapsed under the weight of borrowing. So what's interesting is that nations are now only beginning to learn from this historical event. Quietly, cautiously, they are returning to principles that once seemed old-fashioned. They are paying for their own consumption rather than financing it with foreign debt. They are stockpiling wealth not in paper, but in tangible assets like gold, food, energy, infrastructure. They are trading with one another in local currencies, bypassing the dollar entirely. And they are realizing that sovereignty is not measured by the size of your reserves in someone else's currency, but by your ability to feed your people, to power your industries, and to invest in your future. Now, this matters because it hints at a broader transformation, the move towards a multipolar financial world. For much of the modern era, global finance has been dominated by one reserve currency at a time. First, it was the British sterling, then the dollar. The euro aspired to that role, but never quite reached that level. Now, instead of another single hegemon, we may be moving away into a world of many anchors, currencies, commodities, and assets all playing a role. That world is less neat, could be messy, less centralized, but perhaps even more sustainable. Here's where the conversation gets really important. If the old model of debt-driven growth is fading, what replaces it? What should sovereign wealth really mean in this new landscape? For too long, we have defined it narrowly. Foreign reserves, dollar holdings, bond portfolios. But should it not also include a nation's capacity to grow its own food, to generate its own energy, to educate and empower its people, and to build infrastructure that lasts generations? Should sovereign wealth be measured not just in numbers on a balance sheet, but in resilience, in prudence, and in the real assets that sustain life? Now, this question echoes values long embedded in traditions, in faith traditions, especially Islam. The prohibition of riba or interest was never only about morality. It was about economic justice and growth, about protecting communities from cycles of unsustainable debt. The emphasis on trade in real goods, on wealth as a trust rather than a toy, on saving in ways that benefit the wider community. All of these principles resonate today as we see the global system searching for alternatives. We are actually at a junction, a crossroads, as you say. We can keep walking the cliff on the edge of debt, hoping that crisis will push us over, or we can step back on solid ground to prudence, balance, and real value. And that's where I want to invite you into this discussion. How do you see sovereign wealth in this moment? Is it still about foreign currency reserves, or is it about commodities, infrastructure, and community strength? Can nations truly move away from dependency on the dollar and euro? Or are we still too bound to the old system to let it go? Share your thoughts in this video, your ideas, your critiques. Please join this conversation. Now, it's not only just for economists or policy makers. It's all for us. Because the way we define wealth today will shape the world we pass on to generations for tomorrow.